Topic 1, Israel Adesanya finally exercised his demons on Saturday in the UFC 287 main event, knocking out Alex Pereira in the second round to reclaim the UFC middleweight title, vanquishing his personal boogeyman and making history as the first two-time UFC middleweight champion. Danny, you were cage side for this fight, so I want you to tell me first, what was your reaction to the main event? And I want to know how regaining the title impacts Adesanya's legacy. He has now beaten every middleweight in the UFC's official rankings, top 5, some of them twice, and got the thorn out of his side that is Pereira. So give us your thoughts on how this unfolded and how the win impacts Izzy's legacy.
Yeah, when it first happened, I don't want to say the word shocked because we knew that this was a possibility, right? Whenever you put the level of strikers that these two guys are, I mean, anything can happen. A knockout can happen at any given time. But I remember looking around the arena and people, it was such a big result, I think, that people were just kind of taking it all in, and it took a bit to process. Because Israel Adesanya, to be honest here, he was fighting for his legacy. He had more at stake here than Alex Pereira. And I understand that Alex Pereira had the belt, so technically he would lose something physical, something that Israel Adesanya wouldn't, because he entered this fight as a challenger, not a champion. But beyond just the hardware, I mean, he was fighting for something much bigger, Israel Adesanya. He was fighting for his legacy. Not so long ago, we were talking about him stepping on the heels of Anderson Silva and almost becoming, the GOAT at 185 pounds, certainly number 2. And now you fast forward a few fights later, and if he would have lost a fourth to Alex Pereira, we're talking about maybe that he wasn't really the best of his era in the kickboxing, and maybe not even in MMA either, because look, this guy has 2 wins in 2 different sports over him. But that was clearly not the case. Obviously, we saw that Adesanya laid him out flat, knocked him out, and I think he didn't recover everything, but he kind of kept his legacy alive, kept his legacy a bit more intact, because a loss, again, would have been devastating. I think a loss would have vastly changed the way fans and media look at him. But now, he's back on top.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, another loss here, I think, would have been really damaging to the legacy of Israel Adesanya. So the fact he was able to get at least a slice of redemption, I know, he's still down 3-1 overall. But George, I want to throw it to you. I mean, your thoughts on this main event, and what do you think it does? Do you think we now look at Israel as the better fighter to Alex Pereira, or do you think in terms of legacy-wise with the two of them, he still has some work to do?
There's still some work to do. But, this was important for Israel Adesanya. We've seen what happens when a fighter is down 0-2 to somebody in the past. Miesha Tate to Ronda Rousey, Colby Covington to Kamaru Usman. You're just boxed into a corner where not much is happening with you until you can either get that third shot or hope somebody else wins the title, and then you ease your way back that way. And so Israel Adesanya is no longer, boxed in. And let's not forget the ability to make 10 times more than you probably make as a challenger. Now you got those pay-per-view cuts and everything else that comes with being the champion. Now, as far as the legacy is concerned, yeah, this guy wants to chase down Anderson Silva. Even though he beat him head-to-head, he beat a past his prime Anderson Silva. So to get to Anderson Silva, you got to get to those 10 title defenses. So he's halfway there. And in the modern area, we tend to give a little bit of a grading curve to these fighters. Maybe he doesn't have to get to 10, maybe he gets to 7 or 8. It all depends on what he does, right? Like you said, Mike, the ability to look at the rankings and say, well, wait a minute, this guy's wiped all of them out, lapped some of them 2 times. That's pretty amazing. He's got a great record overall, and little by little, he's just racking up those stats. So maybe he doesn't get to 10 title defenses, and maybe one day we can call him the greatest middleweight ever. But I'm sure he wants to get to that point, and then maybe just join the GSPs of the world, the John Joneses of the world, Demetrius Johnsons, cement himself on Mount Rushmore's, GOAT Talk, that type of stuff. So Israel Adesanya, huge win for him. Yes, he's down 3-1. The kickboxing is just another career, but in MMA, it's 1-1. I disagree with Israel Adesanya on one thing, though. It's not settled. We need to see the trilogy at some point. Do we need to see it right away? No. But I know that's another topic that we're going to get to. But as far as what I watched on Saturday, incredible, historic. And guess what? Hats off to Alex Pereira. A lot of us kept saying he didn't show us as much in that first fight. And I thought this fight was kind of going his way until he got checked by that big overhand right, 2 of them, in fact, and then that big hammer fist. Wow. I want him to recover, but at some point, man, this middleweight division is amazing. I was always on the edge of my seat in both fights. These two brought it.
Yeah, it was so impressive. I mean, Izzy doesn't really have a finish of that nature in the UFC, just something so violent and so devastating. So for him to do that, I mean, it was just utterly impressive. Goes, I guess we'll close with you for the initial thoughts. I mean, how impressed were you by this knockout? And where do you think it puts, Izzy in terms of legacy? I mean, he's done something now that Anderson Silva was unable to do against Chris Weidman when he lost that title. He got it back. And I think being able to do that is, the mark of a truly impressive champion. No middleweight has ever been able to regain the belt. So what does this do legacy-wise?
You have some fighters that look at this situation and they don't even really start to talk about legacy until later in their career. Israel Adesanya has been a guy that from day one, when he entered our studio, right around the time of his first UFC fight, he was already talking about legacy. This is something that's been on his mind. And so it was a big deal, man, for him to kind of get over this hurdle, because a loss here would have just made him a great fighter. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you want to be exceptional, right? That group of just a few fighters, and Israel Adesanya is now back on track to being there. And I thought what was so interesting about this fight was, look, I thought he was losing the fight up until that moment. But one thing he didn't do was exploit the ground game, right? Like if we go back to the last fight, I think a lot of us thought his path to victory was grappling, mixing that in with his striking. He didn't do that. He never lost focus in the fight. Although I did feel he was losing, I don't think he was panicking. And I think that's a big deal for Israel Adesanya. There's so much mental in the game for him when he's in that cage. So very, very big win for him. And I kind of agree with everyone else. I'd like to see this down the road.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in a moment. But first, what I want to ask you guys about is we see Israel Adesanya reveling in his victory there. But the post-fight celebration, he comes to the press conference, and as we see him in the cage, he points into the crowd and does the flop over. And then he lets us know at the press conference that he was looking for Alex Pereira's son and mimicking the celebration he did when he got knocked out in kickboxing. And this seemed to either, show people that maybe he's overly petty. He said himself that he is petty. What did you guys think? Danny, I want to ask you. Do you think this was going too far by Adesanya with the celebration here, or is it all fair game?
I mean, we're talking about a kid, right? If it was like his brother, like an adult, or like a training partner and they got beef, but we're talking about a kid, and it was clearly a traumatic experience watching his dad get knocked out. And we don't know if he's going to get up or not, right? Like we've seen, deaths in combat sports. Obviously they don't happen often, but we know that like getting knocked out like that is a pretty serious thing. So to be honest, when I was hearing those words at the press conference, I was kind of like, and I was like right in front of it. Like there was very, I don't know. There was very little empathy there. But again, these fighters are not regular civilians, right? They have to be kind of stone cold killers in this game. But look, the fight's over, man. Like you won, you put him out. Leave his kids out of it. But I don't know, though. That's just kind of how I feel about it. But again, they're going to do whatever they want to do. And I understand that, Adesanya, he'd been through a lot, right? He had lost to this guy 3 different times. And I'm sure not only Pereira some, but the entire world was mocking him and saying you couldn't get past him, this and that. So I'm sure that moment, and we saw in the emotion in the post-fight press conference, as well as in the cage, it was very relieving. I mean, there was a lot at stake here. But was I a fan of it? No, man. Leave the kids out of it.
Yeah, it was a little bit jarring. I guess George or Goes, either one of you think this was like an okay move with Izzy, or do you largely agree with Danny that maybe it was a little offside?
You know what? I've actually gone back and forth with this, and this is the way I look at it, guys. If I'm Alex Pereira, when my kid did that the first time, I would probably pick up the phone, talk to him, Israel Adesanya. Hey, man, I'm sorry for what my kid did. That was a little disrespectful. We didn't mean it. He's just a kid. If that happened and Israel still did what he did, I would have a bigger problem with it. If he never made that call, then yeah, I think I wouldn't say fair game, but I kind of get where Izzy's coming from. And at the end of the day, yeah, man, it is a kid, and there's so much going on, and there's so many things you have to worry about in life that if something a kid did years ago is still on your mind, it's going to be tough to be successful in life, because you're going to get a lot more from other people than kids. So I guess I kind of look at it that way. I'm really kind of sort of on the fence, but I lean a little bit towards Danny. Like, what are you doing, man? It's petty. But here's the thing: Israel says he knows he's petty, so it's kind of like it's tough to argue that.
Yeah, he owned it.
I'm gonna give Izzy a yellow card. He that was just not necessary. Honestly, the KO speaks for itself. That was a kid in 2017 that did that. Yeah, maybe he's closer to being an adult now. So maybe it is more fair game. But come on, you're really hanging on to that. And Israel, along with a lot of fighters, are constantly always saying, the fans, the media, you guys turn your back. You guys can be so petty, and now you're being petty. So. I don't know. I don't think it was necessary. Such a beautiful KO. Again, that speaks for itself. It's 1-1. You're the champ now. Get to hugging your people, get to your dance. I love all that stuff. Get to your celebrations, trying to hunt out a kid just to give him the message. How does he know that Alex Pereira didn't go home and go, hey, kid, what are you doing? That was uncalled for. He doesn't know that he wasn't parented at that moment. I don't know. But still, Israel, yellow card for you, man. No, don't do that. Great performance, though.
Yeah, and mixed reactions in the comments here. Some people saying no class. Some people, saying it was a W for Izzy. I think that just goes to show he's the type of guy that will hang on to the littlest moment. So I guess just beware to any future opponents, their families, whatever, how you act, he will most certainly remember it. He said,
don't cut that guy off on the road, because years later he might even the score.
Hey, but let me add one thing. Like going forward, we've seen what happens with like Conor McGregor, right? The gloves come off. He'll say just about anything. This particular incident here, if you're a fighter and you're bringing your family in the cage, I'm not saying it's right that these things happen, but you have to know that they happen. And that's something that you have to keep in your mind going forward.
Ruthless goes out here in this episode. Fair game. Fair game. If they're in the cage or around it, fair game.
I'm just saying, like, man, MMA fighters are crazy. They'll do whatever. So if you're going to bring your family in the cage, man, you just have to watch out for that.
Yeah, maybe another example of don't bring your kids to these fights. I mean, we've seen some rough moments over the past couple of years. Usman getting knocked out by Leon Edwards in front of his daughter, things like that. You need to prepare yourself for the roughest moments if you're going to bring your family into this scenario. But we got to move on, guys. Last thing on this opening topic, Israel Adesanya saying at the post-fight press conference, he doesn't want to do an immediate trilogy fight with Alex Pereira. He pretty much dismissed it, said, I put in the hard work to get to my UFC title shot. Alex Pereira got the fast track the first time around, and now it's his time to go earn it, to go beat a contender if he doesn't move up to 205, which seems to be the thinking from both Adesanya and UFC president Dana White, who said at the press conference that he thinks Pereira is moving up and pretty much brushed off the idea of doing this immediate MMA trilogy fight. So what do you guys think? Let's go to you first. I mean, is the right move to do the trilogy fight next, or should Izzy fight whomever else and Pereira either have to go back to the line and work his way up or go to a new division and start fresh?
To me, it feels like unfinished business. I can't remember a fight. I don't know what it was like for you guys, but in our room, we had 5 people in the room and it was dead silent at times. It was so intense, the situation. So for me, there's unfinished business and it has to happen. The problem is I don't think it can happen right now. It just doesn't make much sense. Let's just start with the fact that he probably needs to rest a little bit, right? But on top of that, here's where it gets tricky. If you're the UFC, if you're a business, if you want to make that third fight, you're going to have to do it now, I think. Because if you look at it from a business standpoint, I don't know that the rest of the division is a good matchup for Pereira. Will he make it back to Izzy? That could be a problem.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I want to chime in on this one. In my opinion, Israel earned it because he had defended his title 5 times, so he had the ability to ask for an immediate rematch, and I think he was a willing partner, a frequent fighter. The UFC likes that. In this case, Alex Pereira didn't even defend it 1 time, but he is 3-1 up on Izzy if you involve all the combat sports, or 1-1, and these were good fights that ended viciously on both sides. So I think what Izzy kind of makes sense. Look, if he goes to 205, obviously the case is shut. But if he stays at 185 and beats one other fighter, I think that's a fair request. And I think it lets the division breathe as well so that we can get other people involved. I saw in the chat room here, want to give them a shout out. Taco Cobb says, how about the King of Africa, Duplessis versus Israel Adesanya? Kind of makes sense. Hopefully it fits with the timeline of the UFC wanting to go to Africa. And in the meantime, give a hate to someone else. And if Pereira can't get past that someone else, whoever it may be, then I guess he's just not worthy of that trilogy. But Izzy said one word. He said it's settled. It's not settled.
Yeah. So Danny, we'll just close it out with you. I mean, obviously, I think if you do this fight, it would still be a big fight. It makes sense. It's 1-1 in MMA. Like the UFC could easily do this, but if they don't do it, tell me what's a better option for Adesanya. I mean, some people are mentioning in the comments Dricus du Plessis, who we saw the vague call out of him from Adesanya at the press conference. He wouldn't name him, but the message was very clearly directed at him, saying he's going to drag his carcass across South Africa, and obviously very heated about the things Dricus said around his last fight, being the real fighter from Africa and all that. I don't know if that's a fight that can be made right now. I think you do have to do that in Africa if you could, which I wouldn't imagine is happening in the next 4 or 5 months when Izzy does want to fight again. So you tell me, like, if Pereira is gone to 205, if he needs to take a year off to recover from this knockout, what do you do with Izzy?
Well, first of all, this is kind of like, I kind of had the same reaction and same moment where you kind of have to check yourself. Like, am I crazy? Where when Dana White said, like, yeah, Colby Covington is the next for the title shot, and it's like obvious, and you're like, wait, am I experiencing the same thing that he's experiencing? Same thing here. Like, we get Dana White at the presser saying, like, yeah, no, that's probably not going to happen. Like, kind of doesn't make sense, this and that. And then Israel Adesanya saying, yeah, it's settled. Like, why are you guys even asking me about Pereira? Like, this is done. Like, it's not. I mean, you were literally 0-3 against this guy just moments ago. You get one. He's knocked you out twice. You knock him out once, and all of a sudden it's settled. No way. I mean, a trilogy has to happen. In fact, I don't think the entire series, Combat Sports series, is resolved. And I don't think you need to fight, another 4 times to get it resolved. No, just fight one more time. The winner of that will leave as the winner of the entire series, kickboxing and MMA. But there is one fight pending. Now, I would understand Dana White and Israel Adesanya not wanting to do an immediate trilogy bout if there's tons of contenders, say like 170. You got Bilal Muhammad, you get Shafkat Rakhmonov, Burns. I mean, it's just a long line, and then you don't want to mess with the order of the division. But if we look at 185, Adesanya, going by the rankings, right below Adesanya is going to be Robert Whittaker. He's beat him twice. Below that, it's going to be Marvin Vettori. He's beat him twice. Below that, he beat Jared Cannonier once. Not in a very exciting fight. Below that, he destroyed Paulo Costa. We have to go all the way to number 6, which I assume on Tuesday when it'll get updated, it'll be maybe higher. Dricus du Plessis, who I think we all agree that perhaps is missing that one key victory in order to get a title shot. So if you're talking about a trilogy, an immediate trilogy between Alex Pereira or a fight with Dricus du Plessis, I'm going with Alex Pereira all day. That fight is the one that needs to happen. That's the fight that makes sense, and you got to make it happen almost immediately, because as you guys have mentioned, Pereira is not a young buck in this game. He's like 36 or so. I wouldn't think he's got a long time to build on a crazy win streak and then fight, I don't know, Adesanya 2-3 years down the line. I don't think that's going to happen. So you got to make the fight now. And look, I wouldn't hate it if Pereira wants to move up to 205 and then you don't make that fight because of that. But okay, that's Pereira's choice. If Pereira wants to fight him at 185, I do believe he has the right. He is 3-1 in this series. It makes sense. So again, I'm all on Team Pereira on this one in terms of who should be fighting Israel Adesanya next. But if that's definitely not an option, due to the comments that both Dana White and Adesanya made, just make a fight with Dricus du Plessis. To be honest, I don't want to see any rematch or any trilogies with guys that are 0-2 at this point against Adesanya. And there is bad blood, as you mentioned, Mike. So make Dricus du Plessis. But again, I think it's going to be a thing where whatever you choose outside of Pereira, a bunch of fans are not going to be happy because there's no ideal scenario. There's no ideal fight. Maybe even Hamzat again, but then again, so I know a group of people won't be happy saying he won't merit it. But Hamzat or Dricus du Plessis, I think those should be next if Pereira's not the guy.
Yeah, we'll see what they do. Going to be very interesting. And obviously, let's see what Alex Pereira wants. We haven't heard him speak on what he actually wants from the future as the time we are live right now. So remains to be seen. But obviously, we've taken up a lot of time with this first segment. I think it warrants it. Obviously, a huge result, huge title change, all that stuff. But